Hi everyone, so I'm live. I'm a couple of minutes early. I thought I'd come in and wait for people to come join, if anyone does come join. So if you do come and join, excuse me, I want to adjust my shorts. If you do come and join, let me know that you're here. Hopefully that I'll be able to see you. And then we can get started. So I'm just hanging out. Hopefully you can comment. Can you comment? Yes, hi Jackson. Good to see you. Get your questions ready. I hope you don't get too bored with my class today. You might a little bit. If you go away again, I don't mind. Can you comment? Can you say anything? Let me see. Write something so I know that you can comment. I'm not sure if I did that correctly. Yes. Perfect. Hello. Excellent. Great job. Okay. So it's just you and me, Jackson. What are we going to talk about? What have you been up to today? I think good. I'm going to hang out for a second. We've got a couple more minutes. Excellent. I'm just going to have a one-on-one chat with Jackson. Can you sing for me? You can comment. Good. Thank you, Jackson. Thank you for your Broadway hand washing video. Loved it. You've got to get everyone else has to send those in so that I can go share them. Perfect, Jackson's making me feel comfortable, which is good. Oh, there's a second person watching. It's probably just my husband. Is it you, Wayne? Oh, 3 people. Okay, wonderful. So Jackson's going to keep chatting to me just to make me feel better. So we've got a couple more minutes. We can just sit here awkwardly and stare at the computer and take a look around my office. I had loads of rubbish here and I had to move it from here to that side because discussing photography, it's all about the light, and this is where you can see me in the room. Thank you, Jackson. Love it. Good. So today I'm going to be talking about hi Carmen, excellent, good. Another face is here to see me. All good. So this is starting from the very beginning, and it really is a class for beginners. But it's a class for beginners, not necessarily about, you're not going to leave here today necessarily and go out and start taking photographs. I hope you do. I want you to. So let me just adjust that because I'm awfully overexposed when that's open, but hopefully you can hear me okay. What I want to do today is this is just an introductory segment into photography, but first of all I want to introduce to you equipment. And so we're inundated now with options when it comes to photography and the kind of equipment that you can use, and most of us will nowadays be using our phones. Excuse my granny case, it's so handy, look, you know, just in case all my cards in there, it's fabulous. But so I use my phone all the time, and if you follow my personal Instagram, you see me, I'm always posting pictures with my phone. I'm quite lazy, and the reason I got this one is so that I don't drop my phone when I'm busy taking pictures. But we have our phones. We also have point and shoots. So these are, I found these in a box. These are old archive antique point and shoot cameras. Great though if you've got kids that just want to start out. This one is like a little video camera. It's got LCD lens. And this one here, I haven't got a battery in it. Can't show you. I'm not recommending any particular brands, but that's a point and shoot. Now a point and shoot, what does that do, including your phone? So a point and shoot, the whatever it is you're looking at, and you'll see on the LCD lens, if I can open that again, wrong side, you'll see here, whatever you see coming through here comes out onto the screen. So you're not looking through a viewfinder, you're seeing the image straight onto a screen. So there's no mirror in the camera, it's just a body of lenses coming through what you're looking at, and it's coming out on the screen. Nice and light, very affordable. Everyone can buy those. Same going on here, a little bit better. This one has a pop-up flash. Now, if you know me, you know I hate pop-up flashes. don't use the pop-up flash. We'll talk about that. But so yeah, that's a point and shoot. So nice and cheap. Everyone can get them. Phone's great. Same thing. I love using my phone. Hello, Wayne. But yeah, that's a point and shoot. So they're very affordable, very accessible. And actually, what I did, I skipped because I was nervous. I wanted to show you my very first camera that I still have, that I got. And this is a film camera. And for the very young amongst us, we used to put film in the back of the camera, like this. Shut the camera. And then I learned that when I first started to learn to take pictures was with film. Wayne actually bought me this camera, and I thought it was very fancy at the time. And yeah, it comes with lenses. So this is an SLR, so not a digital SLR, not a DSLR. This is an SLR, single lens reflex camera, and I have a couple of lenses there. And that's how I started. And the thing about it, actually, if everyone could start with film, it really teaches you something, because there's no LCD panel on the back here for you to just look and point and shoot. So you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to understand the relationship of light between the shutter speed and aperture and all those things. So point and shoot, that does it all for you. It does it all for you. You can make slight adjustments now. There are certain modes where you can just kind of change things, but you're really not in very much control. The camera is in control for you, so you don't always get what you want. And some of the other drawbacks, negatives, are much smaller sensor. There's no manual options, and you get much lower grade image. Although phones are really coming into their own, but use them in poor light and you're going to see lots of noise and bad grain on there. So then we move on to DSLRs. Now I don't have, I have DSLRs, I have lots of them, a few knocking around actually, but this is one I don't really use anymore, the D810. Yeah, I won't show you all my cameras because then Wayne will know how many I've got. But this is a digital lens reflex camera, DSLR. Now this is a full frame body, and also this is a full frame. And I'm just going to quickly talk to you about the differences in the two. And the reason I'm going to talk to you about the differences in the two, because I get asked the question constantly about what camera should I go and buy, you know, Jimmy and Tommy, whatever, for his birthday. There are thousands of options, and I could talk to you for weeks about the options that there are, but to be fair, I don't go looking at those particular cameras. But when you're looking at cameras and you see that there are cameras for like $300, $400 or pounds, and then they go up to like 1,000 and 2,000 and 3,000, the difference is all about the sensor really. So you have full frame cameras, and their sensor is pretty much the same size as a film camera used to be, which was 35mm, and then you have DX cropped sensors. Now what that means is, when you look, I'm going to use this, actually I can show you the sensor inside the camera. So when you look inside the camera, where you can actually, let me find it for you. Can you see it? Let me get you some light. Well, inside the camera, I should be able to show you, but I can't. Anyway, inside the camera there is a mirror, and under the mirror there is a sensor. In a full frame camera, your sensor is kind of like this size, and then in a DX camera, it gets smaller, so it's kind of like, yeah. I'm not going to go into the mathematics of it, but put it this way, it's a smaller sensor. There's much more technical and boring videos you can go and find on YouTube that explain the mathematics of the sensor. But the reason you're paying less for some cameras is they have a smaller sensor. The drawback being is that it's a lower grade images. So the better you get as a photographer, the more interested you are in the type of camera you have, and having a full frame camera. If you're seriously interested in becoming a better photographer, buying a full frame camera is a very nice option. It's more of a luxurious option. You can buy secondhand, you can rent. There are great places where you can rent cameras and lenses so you can have a play, but you're just going to get more information in a full frame sensor than you are in a crop sensor. I did shoot initially with a crop sensor, and that was fine. I mean, you don't really know what the difference is when you start shooting it until you start seeing full frame images. You become a professional and you really need to be shooting with a full frame camera. So that's it. And really, if you've got any, hi Joe, don't worry, you're not late, probably bored you. Anyway, if you've got any questions about sensors, we can ask them. I'm going to apologise because this lesson is a little bit wordy and a little bit detailed. So, you know, everyone wants to come in and everyone wants to be a photographer. And when I started, really people weren't. It wasn't the case of everyone was photographers. And actually, when I started, there was a lot less women than there are now. And I think it's actually turned on its head. There's a lot more women than there are men, possibly. But we're all definitely having a go. And that was in the fact digital cameras come along. And people could pick up a camera and they could point it and press a button. And hey, presto, look at you, suddenly you're a photographer. We can all take pretty pictures. Our phones have proved that to us. And there's lots of options there for filters and all that kind of stuff. But for me, really, if you want to learn how to be a photographer, or if you want to learn to take great pictures for your business or you're creative, you really need to start learning from the beginning and the basics. So, you know, you can break the rules, but you need to know what the rules are in the first place. So, any questions up to now? Hi Denton, glad you're here. So if you've got any questions, I've got a few segments. I'm going to tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, obviously we talked about cameras and I've showed you those. I'm going to show you a couple of other bits of equipment. I'm going to talk to you about the benefits of a DSLR, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other new technologies. We're going to touch shutter speed, ISO, aperture and lenses. That's all we're going to talk about today. When we're not wandering around taking pictures, we're going to go to look at focusing and metering and exposure settings, all those kind of things on a different video. But the live, this was the opportunity for you to ask me questions about kit. Now, I do not know everything about all of your cameras, but you can ask me the question. If I know the answer, I will definitely try and answer that for you. So, benefits of a DSLR. So the benefits are, they get heavy, I tell you. Get a workout. The benefits are you have a changeable lens. And this is the expensive stuff. This is the good stuff here, right here, this lens. So you have a changeable lens, and we'll talk about what lenses do for your photography soon. You have all the manual settings, so you can make decisions about how your picture's going to be. More control, and then higher, better quality images. And also what you have, excuse my old lady cup on here, you have a viewfinder. And that's really important, so you can see what you're doing and you can see with better clarity. I don't know, I kind of, when I'm looking through my viewfinder, you kind of go off into some other place and you see the picture better. Other people could argue with me about that, but with the LCD you're just kind of looking and you're not really focusing in on what it is you want to take a picture of. So that's the thing with that. There are new cameras now that are mirrorless, and the reason they've come about is technology. They're smaller, they're lighter. So many people in my industry kind of waxing lyrical about them. The difference from a DSLR to a mirrorless is the fact they don't have a mirror. So with a DSLR, what you're looking at comes through the lenses. The lens that has multiple lenses in it, pieces of glass, it hits the mirror, bounces up for a prism, and then you can see the image through the viewfinder. And then when you press the shutter comes down and it goes into onto the camera sensor. So there you are, you've taken an image. With mirrorless, it's just kind of coming in and going straight to the sensor through the lenses and all of that. All of those computer works. I'm not a technical person. You can go look that up. But it's burning straight to the LCD. I did have a look at mirrorless, and you either it's Marmite. I think you either love it or hate it. I don't like the fact that I'm not looking through a viewfinder at the image that I see. I'm actually looking at a digital representation, so it's kind of looking at a TV screen. So for some people, and definitely kids coming on board, mirrorless is definitely a way to go and have a look at it. I know people talk about Sony a lot, but certainly Nikon and Canon have got their own mirrorless versions. So I'm getting funny questions from my husband. But yeah, I don't love mirrorless. Wayne Sheffield asks, can I get a camera with a pop-up flash? You can. You just go and fill your boots with that. Yeah. So Yvette's asking me, is there a starter kit you would recommend? Well, what we do is and this is a question I get very often too. There are hundreds of options, and so it's Nikon, Canon, Fuji. There's all of those things. But what I want to talk to you about, I think probably you're going to be starting off around about the $500 mark. You can go on Amazon and you'll be able to buy a DSLR with maybe 2 lenses. I can't recommend specifically a brand or a type of kit. What I'm going to talk to you about is the lenses that you want to start with. And then when you go looking for a camera and whatever comes in the starter kit, they might give you an idea of a good place. Now, I bought Nikon and I stayed with Nikon. And yeah, I got rid of all my DX lenses when I moved to full frame cameras. But I've stayed Nikon. And, you know, if you stay with a brand that you're using, it means that your lenses stay good and you don't have to keep changing everything. I did consider changing everything, but Nikon have been great for me, so I stayed with them. Or Nikon, if you say it that way. So moving on, any questions about equipment so far? How many of you did I lose? So I've still got 12 of you here, just hopefully making cups of tea or something. So we're going to talk about shutter speed. And the reason we're going to talk about that, photography is all about light. And some people see light, some people see it so easily and so beautifully for them. And I see people posting pictures on their Instagram that they've taken with their phone, and I recognize immediately that they have an appreciation for light. If they're an artist, if they're a creative person, they see particular lights. And so if you're already that way inclined, then fantastic. I never knew I was. I never considered myself a photographer. I did so many other things before I did this. And as time goes on, you just start to recognize beautiful light and you start to see it and you know what would work well as a photo. I actually don't look for bricks and mortar and things to shoot against. I look for beautiful light in that space. So it doesn't matter to me. When I was shooting weddings, people would say, oh, go and look at the website for this picture or that picture. Or someone may say, oh, this beautiful fountain. Great, so I'll go look at that fountain, whatever, or the archway or the door. But what I'm looking at is what it looks like at a certain time of day, when I'm going to be there and what light's going to be available for me to use. And I think that's where lots of people go wrong. They just assume that they need to be in bright light, and they get out there and they're squinting and it's harsh. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the relationship of the settings in your camera to light. And I really don't want to get overly technical, but this is where it proves to you that photography is something you need to learn if you're interested in taking really good pictures. I loathe, and every photographer I know loathes when somebody says, oh, that's a really nice picture, you must have a lovely camera. Yeah, I can give you my camera and let's see what you can go do with it. And I say that without arrogance. What I mean, I've learned, it's taken me, I think I was about 2007, I really started to take photos and really get involved in photography, but I'm still learning, and you have to learn from the beginning. I think because digital cameras and phones, it's so easy now to just pick up a camera and go point and press. But the moment you're in a difficult situation, the moment you call yourself a professional, the moment you suddenly offer to shoot your friend's wedding, you may find yourself in a bit of a pickle. If it's raining that day, if you're shooting indoors, suddenly you don't know what to do. You've got your camera set to auto mode, and then you'll suddenly realise it doesn't do all the wonderful things you want to do. I mean, fortunately in Florida, there's so many people now that can go out and take wonderful photos because we have such lovely light at certain times of day. But when push comes to shove, you really need to understand the camera's settings and what it can do and how you can mould and create the light that you allow into your camera. So we're going to talk, and I had one available to show you. We're going to talk about shutter speed, the shutter inside the camera. So let me see. Oh yeah, there you go. So you can see, what you can't see, and I don't want to mess up my camera, what you can't see is the actual shutter going down, but you can see where I'm allowing in light, and you can hear it, that noise. Nikons are noisier than Canon. That's the shutter. So the shutter, we talk about the shutter in terms of speed, and it's not actually the speed of the shutter, it's more about the period of time in which the shutter remains open. So has anyone here actually gone in and looked, if they got a camera and they're shooting manually, and had a look at their settings? So the shutter speed is the exposure time, not the speed of the shutter. And it can range from, I think it's kind of like minutes actually, and I've never had my shutter open for that long, but anyone that does, photography of the night sky on a tripod may very well have had their lens shutter open for that long, up to 1/8,000th of a second or something like that. And the thing about shutter speed is you can either use your shutter speed to freeze motion, so like running water, somebody jumping, freezing them in midair, or you can have slower shutter speeds where the camera shutter speed is much slower and you hear the close of the curtain. Let me see if I can demonstrate that for you. Let's slow it right down. So let me see if you can hear. See how slow that was? So that was a slow shutter speed. That was over a second long to much faster. So here's 8,000th of a second. And then if I slow it right down, then you can hear, I was pressing it a few times, but much slower. So with all of the settings in your camera, they all correlate to light. So shutter speed, ISO, and aperture. So shutter speed is the curtain. Now the curtain comes down in front of the sensor. So you have the mirror in front of the sensor, the curtain comes down and it comes up. And the shutter speed adjustment on your camera is how slow or fast you're allowing that to happen. The faster the shutter speed, the sharper the image. The slower, the more opportunity that you can have blur. If you have your camera in automatic mode or P mode and it's shooting for you, that's why your pop-up flash will pop up if you're in a dark space and if your shutter speed isn't slow enough in relation to all the other things too. So depending on what you want to shoot is how you decide on your shutter speed. If you are a sports photographer, photography really for you is all about the shutter speed. Yes, of course the ISO and the aperture are important, but it's the shutter speed that you're going to be focused on. In order to freeze motion of a human being, you're going to be looking at least 500 of a second. So 1/500, that is a kind of the shutter speed and above. In order to obtain that shutter speed, then you have to start thinking about your aperture and your ISO in order for you to achieve enough light to be able to use that shutter speed. Am I driving any of you crazy yet? Please ask me a question if you have any questions about shutter speed. So now the thing about the shutter speed is I probably range, I do shoot in low light, and I occasionally do like a time lapse or landscape or that kind of photography, or when I did my portrait series. If I'm shooting lower than 1/60th of a second, which is really the slowest shutter speed you can have your camera handheld, then I'm going to go with a tripod. I probably average, I use all the shutter speeds to be fair, but probably not, I don't use them all. I probably only go up to 500, 600 of a second. My average shutter speed is around 250th of a second. So, but yes, handheld 1/60th, you can still get some movement. If you go up to 1/25th, 125 second, 1/25th, 1/60th, 250, that's kind of the average shutter speeds that I'm using. If you're a landscape photographer and you use a tripod all the time, then you can use slower shutter speeds and you won't get the camera shake. Hi John, good to see you. Okay, so any questions about that? So tripod, I haven't got a big tripod out, excuse me, but I have a baby one to show you. There are big versions of this. So if you stick your camera on a tripod, you can use much slower shutter speeds as long as you're not touching it. And you can use a remote, whatever. Just touching your camera and holding it, you're going to get a little bit shake, so that's why you get blur. Somebody asked me recently that they photographed their daughter playing volleyball or son playing basketball or something, and they always get blur, and that's down to the shutter speed. The shutter speed isn't fast enough. So that shutter speed, in a nutshell, there's a lot more information that you can have about that, but I want to move on. Oh yes, you do have that one, Joe. That tripod we got from a Facebook conference. They gave it to us, which was nice. But it's cute, it's handy. But no good for your DSLR, good for your phone. Maybe a few small handheld point and shoots. So that's shutter speed. Shutter speed is part of the photography pyramid triangle, and that is the curtain that comes up and down in front of the sensor. The sensor is the thing that captures your image. So the ISO. I can have a sip of my tea. I think Wayne made my cup of tea. I need that. So the ISO, and it's short for something, international, whatever. Somebody tell me what it is. I didn't Google it. But it's not worth knowing what it's short for. But the ISO is the sensitivity of the sensor to light. Can you see a theme here? Shutter is about how much light you're letting in and at what speed. The ISO is the sensitivity to light. So it's a bit like your eye, really, when you go into a dark room, how much your pupil opens and closes. You know, that's the sensitivity to light. And you can walk into a dark room and not see anything, and then it adjusts. And so then you can start to see things and make things out. And that when you go into bright light, the ISO, your eye adjusts much quicker and you can see things straight away. Your camera will have a base ISO. And I think on my camera, the base ISO is, let me have a look. So I would say it's around about 100. And I can go lower to 80 to 64, and then it's got these low settings that are lower than the low. So if I was in, extremely bright situation. But the base ISO, the base number, like 100, would be when your camera is the most productive. It's going to be when your camera works the best. So my computer's kind of like getting seriously hot. I hope I don't lose you. It's wearing on me. So when you up your ISO to higher numbers to allow more lighting, it goes up in periods of, I've lost all the numbers. So 125, 160, 250, I've missed out some numbers, but it keeps going up. Mine can go all the way up to 8,000. The higher your ISO, the more likely you're going to start to degrade the image. So you want to keep your ISO at a good level, but cameras are really good now. With the cheaper DX cameras, if you go too high with your ISO, you're going to get lots of pixels on your image, and we call that noise. It's not like film grain that used to look lovely and kind of attractive. Noise is irritating in photos, and it's all to do with the pixels and the dots. But so your ISO is your camera's sensitivity to light. So the darker area you go, the higher your ISO needs to be. The faster your shutter speed needs to be, depending on the environment that you're in, the higher your ISO needs to be. In order for your shutter to be 1/500 of a second, your ISO needs to be at a certain level. I would say your ISO needs to be like 400 in order to achieve a shutter speed of 500 of a second. And if you raise it too high, you'll get low quality. Cameras have auto ISO. And then when you're starting out, the auto functions on your camera can be good, but they also don't do everything that you want them to do. I'm talking to you right now about using your camera in a manual setting, but we will talk about modes a bit later on. So shooting action, you'll need an ISO of at least 400 to allow enough lighting for faster speeds. Have we got any questions there? I mean, you're hanging in there. Okay, so hi Bella, good to see you. So she is here too. She's intro photography 8th grade. Thank you, John. I knew a gentleman would come in and tell me what ISO means. Sorry about the hair flicky thing. It's weird, you're looking at yourself the opposite way. Yeah, no, I know, but we don't really need to know that, do we? It's just like one of those things. It's just information we don't really need. But what we do need to know is your ISO, super, super important, is about your camera's sensitivity to light. You'll know when you hold your phone up, it starts to adjust, and that's the camera in your phone adjusting the ISO accordingly. I now have a innate sense when I walk into a space, I know what ISO I need in my camera. And for me, before I leave the house to go on a shoot, I would be looking to put my camera in probably around ISO 200. I would have my shutter speed on 1/60th of a second, and then we're going to talk a little bit about aperture. So aperture, it's exciting stuff, isn't it? I know this isn't the sexy stuff, but it really is important that you understand the basic settings in your camera. So now we're kind of getting to the photography triangle of light. Now, I do not learn technically, and this is why I want you to ask me questions. I haven't had any questions yet, really, but I don't learn technically. I learn visually, but you have to understand this stuff. Your camera is a computer, and if you don't understand the settings, if you're just relying on the camera to do things for you, you're not actually going to achieve anything creatively. So you have to decide, do I want to be a photographer? Do I just want to take better pictures? And we can, I'm happy to answer questions about, well, I'm a baker and I make cakes and I just want to do this. What's my best thing to do? And I have this camera and that lens, etc. And I am going to talk about base products that you would need, or base camera equipment that would get you started on that. Lily's like, what's sexy? What are you talking about? Oh, well, I'm so sexy? I don't know. So anyway, so we're now on to aperture. So this is the stuff we love. Aperture is where it's at if you are a portrait photographer. Now, what I haven't got here is a fancy, slideshow showing you photographs that have a wide open aperture and photographs that have a close-off aperture, and we're going to talk about that. On your lens, there's going to be some numbers. This is a really beautiful 50mm lens. It's a 1.2. Is that right? Yeah. 1.2. And that's on here. You see the numbers going off. Oh, so weird. No, that way. Okay, I'm such a grandma. I'm not yet, but 1.2. So weird. Sorry about that. I'm being an idiot. There it is, and you can see the numbers, and that's the value. 50mm, there, I've got it. 1.2. Now this is old, it's an old lens, it's beautiful. Now I use this lens for my portrait project when I went out photographing strangers. It's all manual. When I bought it, I got it home and I realised it was manual focus. It was second hand. I mean, I bought it 12 years ago and it cost me like £1,000. But it's all manual, and I'm thinking, shit, what have I done? I'm sorry, bad language, children. Do I send it back, or do I learn to use it? So I decided to do a project with it where I photographed 50 strangers for 50 days with my 50mm lens, and I interviewed them and stuff. And it just got me trained to use it. Now I keep it because it's sentimental. I'm never giving it up. It takes the best pictures. And also it's great for video and film because it's manual focus. So what that means is the camera doesn't do any of the focusing. I'm doing all of the fine focusing. But you have all these numbers around here, and these are the apertures. Now the aperture, and I'm going to hopefully show you, clearly I don't know how to show that. Food photography, we will talk about that. I love it. Oh, Wayne's got a question in a minute. Why is this subject underexpected? We'll talk about that in a second. Because you look better in dark light, darling. Okay, so the aperture. I'm going to see if you can, I'm going to try and, here we go. Can I move that without, sorry, bear with me a second. This is live. This is happening right now. I want to try and show you, here we go. I want to try and show you, you see there? Oh, come on. I've got oily hands from all that sanitizer. You see here, the camera, the lens is opening. Now that aperture right there, the bigger the hole, remember this is very, very important. The bigger the hole, the smaller the number. So right now you're looking at a 1.2 aperture, and as I shut it down, the number gets much higher, but the hole gets much smaller. So we're finishing there, I think, on like F22 or something. But so the bigger the hole, the smaller the number, so 1.2, and then you shut it down. What would you imagine is happening here? And what is happening here is the bigger the hole, the more light you're allowing in. The smaller the hole, the less light. Aperture and shutter speeds both do one thing. They let in more light, or they let in less light. But they also do another thing. Quite simply, shutter freezes or blurs motion. The aperture makes an image sharper or softer. so it's all about focus. So shutter speed is about motion and aperture is about focus. If your aperture is wide open, so that hole that I was showing you is completely open, think about I've got to try and do that again now. You saw it. Wide open like this. Portraiture artists are much more interested in having the lens wide open like this because they're interested in focusing on part of the image, like the eyes, just in the eyes, you'll see the eyes, and then they want the rest of the image to drop off in focus. So that nice, they call it bokeh, nice drop away from the focus. If you're a landscape photographer or somebody who likes things sharp, pretty much a landscape photographer wants everything to be pin sharp, then you're going to shut down your aperture. The smaller the hole, the sharper the image will be. It's about perspective. So with a large number, my focus will be to my laptop, to my phone, to my lens, to myself. With a small number, a big number, small hole, f22, I'm all in focus. If I'm on f1.2 or 2.4 or 4.8, and the numbers that go up in ratios about geometry, I'm not going to bore you with it, they go up at a different scale, but the smaller the number, the softer the focus. So, you know, that's that. So there is a relationship between shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. What you have to learn as a photographer is, if I want to achieve this aperture, so I'm going to go out in nice natural light, top shade, don't want to be out in bright light, I'm not going to shoot in the middle of the day in the brightest light possible. I mean, you can do, that's a whole different class, but what do I want to achieve? So I want to take a beautiful portrait of somebody. I want their eyes and maybe their nose to be in focus. You definitely do need to have the eyes in focus if they're looking at you, certainly. I've got bright light. I'm shooting, say, an aperture of 2.8 or 4.6, whatever. But that's my aperture. So my aperture is quite wide open. So there's quite a lot of light coming in the middle of the day. So I can do two things. I can shut down my ISO. So I'm going to put my ISO down at the base level of 100. That's the sensor's sensitivity to light, is the ISO. And then my shutter speed, well, there's quite a lot of light coming in, so I want my shutter speed to go quite fast. So I'm going to up my shutter speed to 250th to 500th, it's hard to say, of a second. So if I make my shutter speed higher, I can, I'm letting less light in, but I can still open up my aperture so I can achieve the focus and the look that I want in my camera. And the ISO is where I get to balance it. So yeah, definitely, Lily, I will be leaving this up for you to watch. So it's complicated, but there's the thing. If I was a sports photographer and I want to get we're out on the track, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're in Florida, we've got gorgeous light, and I want to catch Bobby running past me, and I want to freeze his motion. I don't want any blur. My shutter speed is going to be high, 500 of a second. Now my aperture, I kind of want him sharp. Do I decide I want him sharp and the rest, everything else around him soft and not in focus? Or do I want him in focus and the ground in focus and the building behind him in focus? If I decide I want everything in focus behind him, then my aperture is going to be higher, like f10, f16, and up to f22. So the higher the number, f22, the more is in focus, and then my shutter speed, the higher the number, the sharper and the more motion is going to be frozen. If I want both of those things, like I just said, then I might have to play with my ISO in order to allow enough lighting. So what you have to decide is what kind of picture you're going to take in order to know how to change those two settings. So I've talked to you about aperture choices and I've talked to you about shutter choices. Obviously we're here live. So has anyone got any questions up to now? Have I completely lost you? Are you just watching to be polite? I've lost a few people. So are there any questions about what I've talked to you about right now? Do pipe in and give me some questions. What are you all shooting with right now? Is anyone here actually shooting with a camera and want to ask me any questions about their camera and about the settings. And talking about settings, you're going to find them in lots of different places in all of your cameras. And you know, when you get your manual, of course you're not going to read the whole thing. Thank you, Yvette. Bless you. Have you got any questions particularly? Do you not have a camera right now, or you're thinking about getting a camera? But your settings you're going to find. So my ISO is up here, and it changes annoyingly. They move it around, and the quality. So yeah, I don't want to go into all of that. All I wanted to talk to you today was about aperture and ISOs. It's very complex. Do you respect me a little bit more now as a photographer? I've had to learn stuff. It's very. Best Beginner Resources is a book. Yeah, there's lots of things you can do and learn, and there's lots of books that you can read about, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask me questions about those things that they are a little bit scary, but they're not. And it's amazing. It's like you learn anything. Once you start to understand what those things do, then you can learn a bit more. And I've always said to people, understand one of the elements. I understand what shutter speed is and really know what that means. Understand what aperture is and really understand what that means. And then you can move on. I want to do modes in camera modes in another class, but I always recommend beginners start with aperture mode. Just learn how to control the aperture and see what that does to your images, and let the camera decide how it's going to do everything else. Then you get an expert at that one thing and then move on to all the other things. Bella wants to know what the best settings are for self-portraits. Problem is she has an iPhone. Well, hang on, let me just pull up these other comments too. Right, bear with me a second. Yes, great. So I'm gonna talk about the self-portrait, the selfie mode in a second. I will put some links to some good books in here. But I really think it's important that you're able to ask. I had no one to ask, and I did find resources for classes and things, but not being able to ask a question was really difficult, because also you feel a little bit stupid, and you're not stupid, it's new, and it is very complex, but it doesn't have to be. So being able to ask. I'll come back to self-portraits in a second. I always get confused, especially with aperture. Do you know what? Aperture is the best thing as a portrait photographer. And it's so simple. Hopefully you saw my little demonstration of the eye opening and closing. Aperture is what makes things super pretty, and it's all about that focus and that sweet. And the best lenses that you can get give you the best aperture opportunities. But think about your eye. Think about it opening and closing to the light. If it's tiny, the aperture, highest number, smallest hole. Smallest hole, sharper image. Big hole, softer image. That is aperture, and it goes up in a ratio, but just put an apple in front of you or something, stay the same distance, take a picture of that in aperture priority mode in your camera if you have it, and just take a picture and just change the aperture setting one stop, just move it once or go up one number each time you take a picture, and then you'll start to appreciate the difference in aperture. Portrait mode in your iPhone kind of tries to replicate what aperture does. You know, when it just focuses on you and everything else gets soft, that's basically your aperture being 1.4 or 2.8. It's kind of giving you that nice soft focus around you, but you're sharp. That's basically what aperture does when it's wide open. I'm lost but taking notes, Denton, bless him. Ask me questions. I'm really available to take questions. Nikon D7500, yeah, no, that's a good camera, and I would say that's a crop, that's a DX camera, like, you know, one of your starter cameras, but no, definitely a good place to start. So yeah, that's good. What's the focus option settings? You have to be a bit broader with that, John. It is maths. It's very much maths. It's all maths. It's all about numbers. But you can learn, Joe, without it being super complicated. But you kind of need to know this stuff. And it really is just those things. And there's more. There's lots more. But if you start small and become an expert at one, it just grows and becomes second nature. There are a million things in my camera that it can do that I have no idea about. And we can go back and, you know, I can talk about those things as time goes on, but I need to know what I need to know, and I'm learning things all the time, and that's a good thing. Oh, so you're thinking back to, yeah, and that's the thing. Yvette's talking about my portraiture project and all the things that I did in camera, and I'm still teaching myself. And that's the thing about it. If you don't learn to shoot manually, if you don't learn what your camera is capable of, then you can't get as creative as I did with my self-portraiture. I shot all those pictures on a tripod, and I played around with the settings, and I manipulated things using the camera settings and flash, but that's a whole other lesson. Okay, Amy, part of my issue is wanting to use manual mode but then missing the great shot. Okay, absolutely. Do not go to your best friend's wedding, or and please don't shoot when she's walking down the aisle. Pet hate, just saying. But don't go to some important event and decide I'm just going to go manual and shoot manual. I've shot manual since the beginning. I made a decision that I was only going to shoot manual, and so many photographers I know shot in Aperture priority, which is great for them. I still didn't feel like I'm in control. Now I make mistakes, but it's digital, so I can look at the character and see it's overexposed, which means I've let far too much light in, and I have decisions I can make. If my image on the back of my camera is super bright and is overexposed, that's happened is, I can either take down my ISO, take the ISO down to a lower number because I'm allowing too much light into the sensor. I can make my shutter speed much higher so the shutter goes faster, or I can change my aperture. Now my aperture, really, I tend to shoot in the same aperture all the time because I'm trying to achieve the same thing. If I'm shooting a group of people, I'm going to set my aperture to about f8 so that everyone is in focus. Remember, aperture is all about focus. The higher the aperture number, the more focus you're going to get. The lower the aperture number, people are going to start to be out of focus. So groups of 4 or 5 people or more, then you need to up your aperture to about f8. So apertures, really the thing you want to play with. So if you want to be a bit more professional feeling, then you can set your camera to aperture priority. Your camera will then manage the shutter speed for you. It will manage the ISO for you. All you have to do is adjust the aperture setting. So great. So you feel like you're creating an image you want to have while your camera does all the other settings. The reason that's not a perfect situation for the rest of your life, if you want to get a better photographer, is you're going to be in a dark situation. You want to shoot at this aperture or a higher aperture, but there's not enough light coming in. That damn pop-up flash pops up. Hate the pop-up flash. I don't use it. The reason I don't use my pop-up flash, and you'll see on my cameras there is no pop-up flash. I'm actually checking. There's not. Not because I had them custom made. They're professional body cameras, and so that's why there's no pop-up flash. A pop-up flash will only go so far. So imagine you're holding your camera. I've got so many cameras docking around here. So you're holding your camera, your pop-up flash comes up. You often see in your image as a shadow for a start because your hood, now this stops lens flare and it protects your lens, but it's going to hit the hood. That's how far it goes. And so you're going to have a shadow in your image. It makes you bright white and not very attractive, and it makes everything else dark. What happens with flash, it only travels a certain distance in relation to the speed of your shutter. It's not attractive. So what you can do, if you're really interested in investing a bit more, is you can get a speed light. Now I like to shoot all of my flash off of my camera. What that means is I use light and artificial light and studio lights, but I don't have them attached to my camera. I have them off of camera, and I use wireless triggers on my camera to set them off. But you can buy something like this. Now what I would say is, if you're going to use it, this is much better than a pop-up flash. But when you put it on your camera, how I use it, especially if I'm in a room like this, I bounce the light off the ceiling and then it creates a much nicer light. But that's a whole different class. So this is definitely a piece of kit that you could look at buying. And also I'm going to talk to you a bit more about kit and lenses. So let's move on from that. Unless you've got any other questions, let me just check that there's any more questions. Yeah, like I said, Amy, I hear you about manual mode. Use manual mode. in your leisure and for practicing, shoot in P mode for professional, or which is the camera doing everything for you, or shooting aperture priority. Unless you're interested in doing sports, then shoot in shutter priority. If you want to do sports and you're interested in what is it you shoot, Amy, you tell me what it is that you shoot, and then I can tell you what is a good setting to put your camera in. So Millie, she's got her camera, she's talking about that. Thank you very much. So Joe's saying to Wayne, that is all you, pop-up flash right here. Hi Dawn, good to see you. Okay, so let's talk about lenses. I've got the question now for lenses. So I have them all because they all do something different and I love them. But lenses are like candy for me. They are the thing that I want. But yes, there are different things, different lenses, and I'm going to talk through them all. But lenses are about focal distance. So an iPhone, I think, is the lens in an iPhone is wide. So it's about 24mm lens. And what it means is it's about the focal distance. I'm not going to get too complicated, but when it's shooting like this. So it's wide. And each lens has a different kind of focal angle that it shoots. And Millie asked a question about portrait. So my favourite portrait lens, and I'm trying to have a look what's on my camera, is my 85mm. Now this is a new one actually, because I had a beautiful old one and I had it for like 10 years. So I had to recently upgrade. They have a motor in these, and you know, when they go, they go. And I had it serviced. You should look after your lenses. But it kind of died to death. So this is an auto lens, so the camera does the focusing for me. It's got a motor inside. This is the 85mm lens. It's not cheap. I mean, you know, it's a couple of $1,000, just a bit less, but that is my go-to lens if I'm shooting portraits. They call it my beauty lens, but this is a professional standard lens. So if you're just starting out, don't be terrified by what I just said by that, because you can take portraits with other lenses. The 50mm is really good, and there's something you can buy they call it the Nifty 50, and for all cameras really, and that's a really inexpensive starting lens. It's a prime lens. And why is it prime lens? Prime lens means it doesn't extend. In order for you to zoom in, you're going to have to move your feet. And a zoom lens, let me get you a zoom lens. Well, this is a telephoto. Let me get you a standard zoom. A zoom lens, it kind of moves. So it has a starting distance and an ending distance. So this is my 16 to 35mm lens, and you see the numbers at the top. There they are, 16 to 35. So that means its focal distance is the starting focal distance is 16mm, and it's super wide. And so wide, in fact, that if I was to shoot that at its widest point, I'm going to have a vignette around my image, which means like a circle where I've spread it really wide, and then it comes down to a 35. So that's a zoom lens, and this is a prime. There's no zoom in this. So you have to move your feet. 50mm, I think you can buy a 50mm, which is nice for portraits. A Nifty 50 would be good for ice cream shots. Also a 35mm. So I have a basic prime 35mm. You can get cheap ones of those too. So on a base camera, I think you could go online and buy a 50mm, a 35mm, and a camera, probably for like $500 second hand, or even in a kit. I'm going to go and find some kits. I've been talking for nearly an hour now, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try and wrap this up quickly. So a 50mm would be a good lens to have in your kit. Most cameras, when you buy them new, come with a kit lens, and they're normally around about the 17 to 55mm mark. What that means is you've got wide options, 17mm, and down to like a portrait of 55mm. So a 17 to 55mm lens on a base camera, a bargain camera, a DSLR, and you're going to get a 17 to 55mm lens. That's a good starting point, and you're probably going to get that for like $300 or $400, and that's great for kids to start out with. So one lens, which does it all, a zoom lens, 17 to 55. And then maybe get yourself a prime if you can. Like I said, a Nifty 50, I think you can buy those dirt cheap, a couple $100. Now, If you're going to get a bit more serious, then I'd want you to start investing a bit more in your lenses. But generally speaking, most people need a focal length from around 24 millimeters up to 200 millimeters. My longest focal length I have on one of my lenses is on my 70 to 200. This is my workhorse. I use it a lot. A lot of photographers actually don't use big long lenses like this anymore. I still like to capture people unawares, so that's why I have this. And the longest length on that is 200 millimeters, so it's a 70 to 200. But it means I can shoot people from a big distance, not super far away. I'm not like a sports photographer. I can't stand on the side of a football pitch and shoot, you know, a player on the other side and get perfect sharp detail. But I can certainly get all of him. But it also has a nice drop off and a depth of field. That gets complicated. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up a little bit here. So just talking about lenses. If you are interested in portraiture and you're interested in buying a camera, yes, you can get yourself a nice DX, you know, medium-sized compact DSLR, and get yourself a 17 to 55 millimeter lens. If you've got a bit more money to spend, a 24 to 70 lens is a really good base lens to start with. We could go on that. Macro for detail, 100 millimeter lens, Joe, would be great for capturing food. The thing about it with your phone, for taking selfies, it's all about great light, and for taking ice creams. I thought about you actually when I was thinking about this and what I was going to say to you all. If you're shooting product, and I know that you shoot your ice creams with your light behind you, I feel like I need to come in and kind of show you. What I would really prefer you did is went with the light behind you, so the window that you have behind, you know, that you have in your shop, I would prefer to see the window behind you, so that's almost like a big softbox coming down on your subject, and then have your ice cream in front. So do not focus on the object that you're shooting against, like your backdrop. Focus on where the light is coming from, and that's more important than getting the detail of the thing in behind you. So it's about moving around. So move around in your shop and see where the best light's coming in, and, you know, have a practice, but also be consistent. I always say when people shoot in product, just be consistent and you know, shoot the same way. Once you found a winner, stay with it. Yes, the opposite side, Joe, definitely. But just have a play with it, see how it looks for you, because they don't look bad right now. Avoid crazy lenses everywhere. Oh God, sorry about that. Avoid using crazy filters, I mean. Yeah, go easy on all those. Did I miss any questions? Not really. Right, it was a long lesson. Sorry to keep you so long. If you've got any other questions, you can just message me. I'm going to post some links in here and some cheat sheets if you want to come back and have a look. So, and links to different sites, links to books, and also a sheet for the camera settings so you can understand it all. Interesting. We know nothing. We think about brand, and to make our pictures have to say, yeah, absolutely. Do think about your brand. And I recognise your pictures immediately, so you're not doing a bad job. I'm just saying that if you move, sometimes you may find yourself in better light. But you have some backlight coming from the door. But start thinking about the light more than the back wall. It's not about the back wall, it's about the light. And also making sure that you put, anyway, I like when you have the hand and you're holding the thing, but just move around. See if there's a sweet spot in that. That's where it will look better. Well, look, I'm glad I was able to bring something for you. Kill an hour at least while we're at home. I've been talking for far too long. Do send me any questions, and I will work on doing some other videos where you don't, well, it's not live, but it's not so long. I'll keep it to 30 minutes and introducing the next steps and the next elements in your photography. Thank you so much for being here for so long and for listening to me chat on. If you've got any tips of how I could have done this better, please send them over. This is a first. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. All right, take care. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.